Welcome to the Market.Sell.Win podcast. We are fortunate to have with us today Chris Alfirevic, whose career, spanning over 30 years, has been focused on sales, marketing, and public relations, primarily in the real estate and construction industries. His sales experience stems back to his grade school days, where he worked in his family's retail floral business. For the last 20 years, he has been a director of business development, leading the generation of new business and client relationship management for the national real estate practice at RSM, the nation's leading provider of audit, tax, and consulting services focused on the middle market. In our 4-part interview, Chris will talk about his career journey, and I think you'll really enjoy hearing his sales perspective and the process that he follows around account planning, proposals, and negotiating the deal. In this segment, we'll focus on Chris's career path, the skills that he's found to be important, and the impact that mentors have had in shaping his career. So welcome to the show, Chris.
Hey, Julie. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. So what we're trying to do with our show is really help people to understand that there isn't a direct route for our careers, that experiences build on each other, people and situations influence us, and the path kind of reveals itself as you march along in life. And I would say that what I found particularly interesting as I've spoken to other guests is the impact that their childhood has had in shaping their careers. And I know that's going to be the case for you as well. So tell us, can you kind of walk us through the path that your career has taken and the steps you have walked along to get where you are?
Sure. And interestingly enough, you bring up a good point that I really think for all of us, regardless of what age we are or where we're at in our career, it literally is a body of work, stemming from your childhood through college and career steps. And you were kind enough to mention working in our family retail business. I literally was working behind the counter, probably early in grade school, and helping customers and ringing things up and just understanding how to work with people and take orders and get orders from the coolers and things like that. And that really started me down a path. And you kind of throw in some other things like being a caddy in that mix and parking cars in our family yard, which was next to a golf course. Just learning at a very young age how to approach people, work with them, and understand what was happening. It had really been quite a large part of my development. From there, and it landed me a job working construction in high school, where at the age of 16, I became an assistant superintendent at a residential construction site. And what was challenging about that was I had approached people my father's age and my grandfather's age and ask them to do things or redo things that perhaps a resident didn't care for, what have you. And it just really taught me you have to be careful or watch how you approach things and the nuances behind them, which kind of morphed then, Julie, staying with your thought about, life or how it all encompasses, to really led to college. And I decided that I really enjoyed communications, and I was a communications major. But through that, I did a couple of internships with 2 very different entities just for exposure and to see where I might find myself working. And I did my first internship with a large public relations firm, and that was a very different, just large accounts, large entities, things like that. And then I had also worked for a small branch office of a large national insurance entity, and very different, very hands-on, very different approach there. But I think at the end of the day, if I step back and look at all this, I would say I've always been very fortunate to really be engaged in what I have done and have some level of passion for it. And I would encourage anybody at any point in their career to make sure they're having fun and can enjoy what they're doing. And if they could do that, you've often heard people say, if you're having fun, you never work a day in your life. And I think there's a lot of merit to it. And while you're doing that, I've been very fortunate in the real estate and construction industry to serve wealthy clients. And it's kind of neat to have cool clients because you get to go to cool places and do cool things. And that's kept the job fun and interesting over the years.
Yeah, I would imagine it would. But I think you're right about the passion piece. I mean, we need to earn a living. But it sure is more interesting if you can wake up every morning looking forward to what you're going to do that day, or just generally speaking, liking what you're doing. So, yeah, totally get it. The fun piece can't be underestimated.
No, it can't, especially in these times.
So true. So, so continue on with your story.
Well, it's just that I guess if I really step back, I never in a million years would I have thought I'd be working in a corporate environment in a public accounting firm that I'm working for now as a guy that barely got through accounting. And what I learned with that, and it certainly was a different animal 20 some years ago, was I was never technical. I was never wired for math. I was never wired to be technical. But what I did understand that those that were wired that way weren't necessarily communicators or strong communicators. Many of them weren't. They weren't writers. They weren't comfortable working the phones, those sorts of things. So I found it to be a good, I hate to use such a trite example, but a very good yin and yang relationship. And again, here I am 20 some years later with what has been a very, how do I want to say it here? Just a very solid career, both personally, professionally, financially. And again, I never would have thought that when I struggled with accounting classes that I would do that. But it just shows people how much diversity is out there in the work world and how you could work or wind up in such odd places if you position yourself well or just, work hard to get there.
No, great insights. So now that you've been doing sales for many years now, but tell us a little bit about what does a typical day look like?
It's certainly changed over the years. And I think that, and I don't mean that that's more of a, quite frankly, an age thing. And what I mean by that is when I started in sales and you start in any new sales job, you've got to find your way. And literally when I started with my current firm, I was making 50 to 70 phone calls a day, smiling and dialing, as we say, trying to build my book of business and figure out the right markets and the right people in the right places. And here I am now 20 years later. I promise you, I don't make 70 phone calls a day, and I'm glad that I don't. But it really, you grow with it like anything else in life. You understand your client base, you grow with it, you build relationships that lead to referral relationships, and you're farming all the way along. You're farming clients and prospects, and that's been a pleasure because undoubtedly, and without being self-serving, I am a people person and I love to nurture and build things. So that's been part of the enjoyment of the career. But that's very, very high level in terms of, from where it was, 30 some years ago to where it is today. But I do have some things that I've been doing every day for the last X number of years. And what I would offer is I really try to I try to start the day easy. And what I mean by that is, might be reading, what's coming across the wires via the internet and all of the other social media platforms, or, the reading the newspaper or the trade rags. And then even if I knew I had to make a bunch of calls when I was making high volume calls, I would literally, I might call my wife as my first call or a friend and just talk about what I anticipated doing for the day, essentially getting warmed up, stretching, so to speak, like an athlete might, but just kind of getting in a flow. And I would never jump right into the hardest call of the day as the first call if I didn't have to. So, I start things easy, and I even share that when working on proposals. I never start with a cover letter. I start with something really easy to get in the flow and the rhythm of the work. So I might look at the resumes and who's my team and what do they bring and what kind of thoughts do those bring. So I would just say that has been a constant where I look just to kind of get in a groove and a flow to make the day happen and let things snowball in a good way. Sometimes a little crazier than others, no doubt, but I think that's probably a good summation of a day.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I like the concept of warming up. Sometimes I know personally, if I'm working on, 5 things, I might say, oh, let me tackle the hardest one first. But if you're calling folks, let yourself kind of groove into it and make it easy. I can totally get the logic of that. So, well, that was helpful and interesting, honestly, because I think probably there's some folks out there that may not be taking that approach. So, and it sounds like you have a bit of a routine. You kind of chunk out your day to the extent that you can. So there's a little bit of structure. Am I reading into that, or is that a fair statement?
No, that is a fair statement. And it's certainly different, just based on in different parts of your career where you have more control or less control over your time. But, and I also find that, just for me personally, and I tend to work longer days by choice, but I don't, there's always a point in the afternoon where I go, or in the evening, I'll do this far better and far faster tomorrow morning than I will, struggling through it tonight. So you do pick and choose those battles, so to speak, but structure is key. Stephen Covey, they had a great saying, which was, plan your work and work your plan. And I still rely on that on a regular basis. And I'm not saying you have to have everything mapped out or structured out, but you've got to have some definitive ideas of what you want to get done and really try to focus on another analogy they often use of moving rocks, not pebbles, to have some moxie to your day, for lack of a better expression.
Yeah, no, good tips for sure. And so true on the knowing when to call it, because I think so many of us, and I did this probably when I was younger in my career, I would just keep plowing through and I'm like, no, I'm going to get this done. I'm going to get it done. But 9 times out of 10, I either made a mistake, it wasn't my best work. And if I had just said, okay, that's enough, let's come back tomorrow, I would have had a much more impactful whatever I was working on. So awesome.
That's a good point, Julie. And to that end, I often would get, maybe 10 or 20 emails ready to go in the evening. And I was just dying to hit that send button to have it done. And I thought, no, wait on it. And sure enough, you go back the next morning and, you might have embarrassed yourself with a typo or an error or something. So fresh eyes are always a good thing.
Totally agree. I even had a boss say to me, Julie, I know you're working hard, but don't send emails after 10 at night. Because there's usually something that's, something's wrong. I'm like, yeah, that is an excellent point. So I have tried to pass that along to others as well. So, all right, tell me, as you have gone throughout your career, have you ever felt out of your comfort zone when you moved into a new role or new responsibilities within a role? And I think my point here is just, my guess is yes. And, and that's normal, but how did you work through it?
Oh, yet another good question. And it's good to be out of your comfort zone to a degree. I've always, and most all of us always look to learn and improve on oneself. But you need to know your boundaries, and you used the term earlier about plowing through things. Sometimes it's good to force yourself to learn new things and plow through it and learn it and come through the other side and be excited about it. But yet, if something, especially in a technical world, for example, in accounting or what have you, if you don't have that skill set, and I think your key point here would be, Julie, is to go find the right SME, find that subject matter expert, and get the help and make sure things are done right. And whether it's for your own sake or a client's sake or that sort of thing. So I think the key thing is knowing your boundaries. It's, again, good to know where you're comfortable and not comfortable and when you need help or when you just need to put your head down and plow through it. So a lot of variables to that question, but agreed. And nothing replaces hard work or knowing. I used to say in the PR days, you're never more than 2 phone calls away. If I didn't have an answer, you were a second phone call, or I know somebody that did, and I still rely on that to this day.
So let me ask you this. What skills, and I think we'll focus more on the soft skills, that have you found to be the most important in your career?
From a sales or business development perspective, I think when I step back and look at my day-to-day world, and this varies with clients and prospects and the size of entities you're approaching, but it's a little bit of everything. And you're right. It's not for me in a technical sense. It is soft. And I will often feel like sometimes you have to be a detective. You've got to dig into the facts, understand things. A bit of a historian. I was a history minor in school. Not that got me anywhere, but I love the story and loved understanding it. I always felt you really need to understand where you've been before you can know where to go. And that has helped being a bit of a historian. Depending on your client, sometimes you have to be a psychologist, an empathetic listener, and a friend. I had the pleasure to work with an entity where I just listened to this person for several hours, just pour out all the issues they had, and we were able to find a lot of good common ground by just listening and understanding why they were thinking and why things were happening the way they were. Sometimes, perhaps on a larger engagement, you have to almost be a lawyer. While I'm not a lawyer and don't want to be one, but you have to be able to read contract law or understand where concerns are or where things could go awry. And also really big on logistics. And I don't mean that of just getting to a client's doorstep. I mean it in all encompassing behind the client and or the engagement. And what I really mean by logistics is taking the thinking out of it, the little things. So the client or prospect doesn't have to ask for something or think twice about something, because I feel that's just an example of how it is to work with us in our firm. So I really go to great lengths to think through everything step by step to make things simple and ultimately make it a win-win for everyone. And then the big thing, if you tie all these things together, it's really about understanding the people and the entities you're trying to serve. I really, and this has really come more so over my career than on the front side, but I shouldn't say forever, but now I take a big step back in everything I'm doing, trying to understand the people, trying to understand what their agendas are, whether it's political or personal, and try to, again, take the thinking out of it. So you've got just that win-win environment.
Yeah, no, I mean, particularly on the sales side, it is about relationships. And so that listening and empathy and making it easy for them. I mean, all of those give them a taste of what it would be like to work with you and really the organization. Because like you said, I mean, you're on the front end of the process. And so the impact or the impression that you make on them is really important. So, yeah, interesting skills. And some of these, thinking back to just your growing up, all of that experience that you had then kind of molded you into who you are today, which is a people person. So I can see how those skills have had an impact and how important they are for others in sales, really to understand. Because as we've probably both run into salespeople that didn't have those skills, and the ones that have, the stronger communication and the listening and all that tend to have a different career path. Let's put it that way.
Agreed. And, it really, as I said earlier, it's knowing where to find help as well. I feel that I'm a strong writer. Am I the best writer? No. Am I the best on absolute grammar dictation? I'm pretty darn good, but knowing that there's, that you can find a specialist to help you refine things.
Right.
And you don't have to do everything well, because you'll go nuts trying to do everything well. But if you know where to find the right resources, and if maybe you're not a good listener for whatever reason, then have somebody team up with you that could be better than you, and don't be afraid to ask for help if there's a certain area where you need it.
Totally agree. So let me ask one last question for you, and that is, what roles have mentors played in your career?
Interesting. Had a number of them, and kind of 4 quick points, and I'll just go through them a little bit rapid fire. In a family business, it's how you treat the customer, and it's also your bottom line. So you've got to take care of the customer. The business will take care of itself, but you're also watching business, and that was always good, and that has always been a theme, because you have to be responsible for your client, you have to be responsible for your firm, and it's got to work. In college, we had a guest speaker, a very prominent newscaster, who left us with a great bit of advice, and that was learn as much as you can about everything you can. Now, you have to be careful. You've got to find that balance. But, I always felt I went and did my day job really well, but when I had extra time, I would jump into other areas within the firm to make myself more valuable and get more engaged. So that was always a great piece of advice. And I had another boss who told me, if you ever have to make a tough phone call, get off your ass and make that phone call standing up. And that I learned that at a very young age. It was my first job out of school, and I actually found myself giving that advice to my daughter, who had to make an equally difficult phone call. And she said, "Dad, that really helped." And here, that was generational advice. And I still stand up for those tough calls today. And lastly, my last or most recent boss, who was wonderful in mentoring. We all worked very hard, but he always made sure that we all kept an eye on family balance. And not that I hadn't throughout my career, but I would just encourage everyone to keep in mind, and to your point about sending emails at 10 o'clock, there's got to be a balance, and keep family or friends or partners, whatever it is, keep that in mind, and try to be balanced as you go forward.
Excellent. Wow. Great insights. And I mean, that's really the point of this show too, is like sharing those little tidbits of advice that we've gotten throughout our careers. Cause, hopefully those words of wisdom that you've just shared can now benefit somebody else. So thank you. And thank you for being with us today. It was great to hear. And I enjoyed hearing your story and your path.